The Watchtower, study November 30th, 2024. Are you heeding the warnings? 1. What judgment will soon take place? Jesus will soon judge every living person. He described the time leading up to this judgment with a prophetic sign of his invisible presence and the conclusion of the system of things. This prophecy is recorded in Matthew chapters 24 and 25, and in the parallel accounts of Mark chapter 13 and Luke chapter 21. 2. On what will we focus our attention, and why will this help us? We will focus on the three parables Jesus provided: the sheep and the goats, the discreet and foolish virgins, and the talents. Each parable highlights how a person's behavior affects their judgment. By reviewing these parables, we can identify important lessons and how to apply them. The first parable to be discussed is that of the sheep and the goats. 3. When will Jesus judge people? Jesus will judge people during the Great Tribulation, just before Armageddon. In the parable of the sheep and the goats, he described this judgment as separating those who support his anointed brothers from those who do not. Like a shepherd separates sheep from goats, Jesus will distinguish those who are loyal from those who are not. According to Isaiah 11:3-4, why can we be sure that Jesus will judge people fairly? Isaiah 11:3-4 assures us that Jesus will judge righteously as Jehovah's appointed judge. He carefully observes people's conduct, attitude, and speech, including how they treat his anointed brothers. One key way sheep-like ones support Christ's brothers is by helping in the preaching work. These ones will be judged as righteous and have the hope of everlasting life on earth. By remaining faithful through the Great Tribulation, they secure their place in the book of life. 5. What is the lesson of the parable of the sheep and the goats, and who should be interested in it? The parable teaches the importance of proving oneself faithful and loyal. It primarily focuses on those with the earthly hope, who show their faith by supporting Christ's brothers in the preaching work and following the guidance of the small group of anointed brothers selected by Jesus, Matthew 24:45. However, it also serves as a warning for those with the heavenly hope, as Jesus observes their conduct, attitude, and speech, requiring them to remain faithful. This lesson ties into two additional parables in Matthew chapter 25, which contain specific warnings for the anointed. 6. How did 5 of the virgins prove to be discreet? Matthew 25:6-10. The 5 virgins proved to be discreet by being prepared and vigilant. They brought lamps and extra oil, anticipating that the bridegroom might arrive late at night. This ensured that their lamps could keep burning even if the wait was prolonged. When the bridegroom arrived, the discreet virgins were ready and entered the wedding feast with him. In a similar way, anointed Christians who remain faithful and vigilant until Christ's arrival will receive their reward and join him in his heavenly kingdom. 7. What happened to the 5 foolish virgins and why? The 5 foolish virgins were unprepared when the bridegroom arrived. Their lamps were about to go out, and they had no extra oil to keep them burning. They had to leave to buy more oil, and while they were gone, the bridegroom arrived. Those who were ready entered the marriage feast, and the door was shut. When the foolish virgins returned, they were denied entry because they had not been prepared to wait as long as needed. 8-9. What lesson can anointed ones learn from the parable of the virgins? Anointed ones must prove themselves prepared and vigilant. Jesus highlighted the danger of not enduring faithfully to the end, as such individuals would forfeit their reward. This serves as a warning for all, whether their hope is heavenly or earthly, to remain watchful and ready to endure. Jesus also followed this parable with the parable of the talents, emphasizing the need to be industrious in their service to Jehovah. Together, these lessons stress the importance of staying faithful, prepared, and active in serving Jehovah until the end. 10. How did 2 slaves prove faithful? Matthew 25:19 through 23. The two slaves in the parable of the talents proved faithful by working diligently to increase their master's interests. Before the master went abroad, he entrusted them with talents, a significant amount of money. These two slaves used the money wisely and doubled what they had been given. When the master returned, he commended their efforts and invited them to enter into the joy of their master. This illustrates their industriousness and loyalty to the master's interests. 11. What happened to the sluggish slave and why? The sluggish slave, who received 1 talent, failed to use it wisely. Instead of making an effort, he buried the talent in the ground and had nothing additional to offer when the master returned. The slave displayed a poor attitude, accusing the master of being a demanding man instead of taking responsibility for his failure. As a result, the master took the talent away from him, and he was cast out of the household. This outcome highlights the consequences of negligence and lack of zeal. 12th. Whom do the two faithful slaves represent today? The two faithful slaves represent anointed Christians who remain loyal and industrious in their service to Jesus, their master. Jesus invites them to enter into the joy of their master, granting them their heavenly reward through the first resurrection. On the other hand, the sluggish slave serves as a warning for anointed ones, illustrating the need to remain zealous and diligent. 13 to 14. What lesson do anointed ones learn from the parable of the talents? Anointed ones learn the importance of being industrious and diligent in their service to Jehovah. The parable highlights what could happen if they lose their zeal, which would jeopardize their opportunity to make their calling and choosing sure and enter the heavenly kingdom. The parable of the virgins and the talents emphasizes the need for preparedness, vigilance, and hard work. Additionally, Jesus' comments at Matthew 24:40-41 provide further warnings for anointed ones about the importance of remaining faithful during the final judgment. 15 to 16. How does Matthew 24:40-41 highlight the need for anointed ones to be watchful? Jesus highlighted the importance of being watchful through his description of a final judgment involving the anointed. He spoke of 2 men working in a field and 2 women working at a hand mill. Although they appeared to be doing the same work, Jesus said that one would be taken along while the other would be abandoned. He then urged his followers to keep on the watch because they did not know the day their Lord would come. This message aligns with his similar statement after the parable of the virgins. These comments appear connected, emphasizing that only genuine and faithful anointed ones will be taken along and welcomed by Jesus into the heavenly kingdom. To remain watchful, anointed ones must stay spiritually alert. Any who fail to do so will not be gathered with the chosen ones. By extension, Jesus' words serve as a warning to all of God's people, regardless of their hope, to remain faithful and vigilant. 17. Why should we not be concerned about when Jehovah chooses to anoint some with his Holy Spirit? We trust Jehovah's judgment because we know him well. It is not a concern if Jehovah has chosen to anoint some faithful ones in recent years. Jesus' illustration of the 11th hour workers in the vineyard provides reassurance. In the illustration, those invited to work later in the day received the same wage as those who started earlier. Similarly, regardless of when anointed ones are chosen, they will receive the heavenly reward if they remain faithful. 18 to 19. What lessons and warnings have we considered? We have learned the importance of remaining faithful and loyal to Jehovah, especially for those who hope to live forever on earth. The parable of the sheep and the goats highlights the need to stay loyal now and during the upcoming Great Tribulation. At that time, Jesus will judge the faithful as worthy of everlasting life. We also reviewed 2 parables with warnings for the anointed. In the parable of the discreet and foolish virgins, The wise virgins stayed prepared and vigilant, ready to wait for the bridegroom. In contrast, the foolish virgins were unprepared and were denied entry to the marriage feast. This teaches us to remain ready and patient, no matter how long it takes for Jesus to bring this system to an end. Additionally, in the parable of the talents, the two faithful slaves were industrious and earned their master's approval, while the sluggish slave was rejected. This warns us to stay diligent in Jehovah's service until the end. Finally, the anointed must remain watchful to be taken along by Jesus to their heavenly reward. They eagerly look forward to being gathered together to Jesus and sharing as his bride in the marriage of the Lamb after Armageddon. 2 Thessalonians 2:1, Revelation 19:9. 20. What will Jehovah do for those who heed his warnings? Jehovah will provide those who heed his warnings with the power beyond what is normal, enabling them to stand firm and faithful before the Son of Man. Whether their hope is heavenly or earthly, Jehovah will reward their faithfulness by ensuring their names are written down in the book of life through his undeserved kindness. This assures them of his protection and blessings as they remain loyal to his guidance and heed the warnings in Jesus' parables. What lessons can we learn from? The parable of the sheep and the goats. From the parable of the sheep and the goats, we learn the importance of proving ourselves faithful and loyal to Jehovah. This parable primarily applies to those with the earthly hope, who demonstrate their faith by supporting Christ's brothers in the preaching work and loyally following the guidance of the small group of anointed brothers chosen by Jesus. However, those with the heavenly hope must also take this parable to heart. Jesus observes their conduct, attitude, and speech, and they too must prove themselves faithful. What lessons can we learn from? The parable of the discreet and the foolish virgins. The parable teaches the importance of being prepared and vigilant. Jesus was not indicating that there are two groups of anointed ones, one prepared and one unprepared. Instead, he was warning that if anointed ones fail to remain faithful until the end, they would lose their reward. As John 14:3-4 reminds us, this is a serious reminder for everyone. Whether our hope is heavenly or earthly, we must take the warning to heart. We must stay on the watch and be ready to endure to the end, as emphasized in Matthew 24:13. Jesus followed this parable with the parable of the talents. This second parable highlights the need to be industrious in our service to Jehovah. What lessons can we learn from the parable of the talents? From the parable of the talents, we learn the importance of being industrious and diligent in our service to Jehovah. Jesus emphasized that anointed Christians must remain prepared, vigilant, and zealous in their efforts. If they were to lose their zeal, they could fail to make their calling and choosing sure, and lose the opportunity to enter the heavenly kingdom. Jesus also provided additional warnings in his comments at Matthew 24:40-41, which highlight the seriousness of remaining faithful until the final judgment.